Welcome back to another edition of the Beers and Pixins football podcast. We are talking about college football on this one. If you want to hear NFL, go to the other one. But we are in week 14. We just finished up the end of the regular season. We had rivalry week last week. I was a nervous wreck on Saturday, but I didn't expect anything else. We'll get into all that fun stuff before we get kicked off. Mason, how we doing? We feeling good? I know that LSU ended on a W, ended on a good note.
Yeah. First thing, I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving week. Apologies for the missed upload. We had some issues recording, but I think just ended up giving the week back to each other and having a good family celebration. But yeah, I was able to catch the LSU game. It definitely wasn't going the way I was hoping for most of the game. They started off pretty slow, and I don't want to say they started off slow. More so, I think A&M's defense came in with a game plan of how to attack this game. That's to slow down this LSU offense, and then when they have the ball, kind of like how Michigan plays, it's let's drag it out, make it as short as possible. And I think the first half possession was something crazy like 19 or 20 minutes to 10 or so. So I mean, they had the ball twice as long as LSU did. And so those couple, I think they had like 2 3 and outs, which for this Jaden Daniels offense is pretty bad. You're not usually used to those. So got off slow, but came out in the second half, and Daniels did what he's been doing all season long, took care of business, had a $130 on the ground, threw for 3 touchdowns in the second half. Neighbors, another fantastic game. There was one kind of, I don't know what the word to describe it was, cool, but also unfortunate moment of Neighbors just made a crazy play where he took like a 15-yard in route all the way across the field for 50, 60 yards touchdown with like probably 100 yards total covered. Ended up getting called back from a holding call down the field, which may or may not have made the difference in not being a touchdown, but nonetheless, it nullified. If the play would have stood, he would have been LSU's all-time leading receiver in yards record.
Yeah,
and the player that caused the penalty, Kyron Lacy, was very upset with himself, like literally like crying on the sideline, knowing like what he had taken away from him, which I thought was good, and sucks that the play happened that way. But also it was cool to see how much this receiving core and this team has built like a brotherhood, and they're, in it for each other, and they want each other to succeed as much as they can. So it was really cool to see that he was that invested in it for him. Bounce back. Kyron Lacy had a 15-yard touchdown like the next drive to kind of make up for it. But with that said, Malik Neighbors has said he's coming for the record. He's playing in the bowl game as of now, which is really cool. We'll see if Daniels decides to play or not. I know he's obviously, got draft prospects on the line. A lot of players, especially when you're not playing for something more significant, like the CFP, tend to sit out. He did accept an invitation to the Senior Bowl, so he might more just lean into that as opposed to our bowl game, give Nussmeier a little bit more of a, showing chance to get warm going into next season. But nonetheless, I'll take it for what it is. As far as a full season for my Tigers, didn't go the way we wanted, but hopefully Daniels did enough to secure the Heisman, and Neighbors did enough maybe to win the Blitnikoff. So we'll see.
yeah, for sure. I think even though I think Marvin Harrison is, the clear number one prospect and, maybe the best wide receiver in college football, I think Neighbors may have the edge on him a little bit just in terms of stats wise and the actual season that he had. So it'll be interesting to see how that went down. But yeah, I was happy to see LSU win. I all I saw was the highlights. Wasn't too focused, to be honest, on the LSU game, because at the same time we did have another game going on. We had the game, some call it, Ohio State and Michigan. Which, I mean, if you listen to this podcast, you probably know how that ended up. Don't really need to go into the score. Wanted to review it though. Wanted to kind of go over, just kind of recap how it went. And I think we're also going to talk about the Iron Bowl a little bit and what on earth happened there, because that was insane. And then I think most of the time we'll be spending on predictions for all the conference championships, and talk just a little bit about the college football playoff rankings, and pretty much the final ones before we actually get to the very final. What is that, penultimate? That's the word for that.
Yeah.
Penultimate. Yeah. So I mean, just as we always do, we're gonna stick with tradition. What do you think?
For the Michigan game?
The Michigan game. We'll do that one first.
Yeah. So, as we've talked, I think going into the game was really hard to create expectations on what I was looking forward or what I was expecting to happen. Was kind of nervous going into it. I was like, oh, I don't know which way I'm gonna sway or how this game's gonna go. Is it gonna turn out like last year where it ended up just they pulled away and it was a blowout, or is it gonna be vice versa where Ohio State pulls away? I again, the game was on at the same time as the LSU game, so I didn't sit there and like not change the channel for the full 60 minutes. I was going back and forth, so I'm sure there's bits and pieces that I missed. We originally, again, the recording didn't go out. We had some technical issues, but I did predict a Michigan win last week. I said it was going to be close, about 1 to 3 points. I know Michigan was a 3-point favorite going into it, and I said it could easily be within that, which for a bit it was looking like it was going to be. These defenses are both really strong. Corum was more effective than I was expecting, and kind of vice versa. TreVeyon Henderson was not as effective. Trainum seemed to be a little bit more effective, which, funny enough, I had Trainum in one of my lineups for DraftKings just because he was so cheap. And I was like, this guy, maybe he ends up, they struggle with him and they get him in the game a little bit more, change up the pace, which is kind of what I was looking for with Michigan, just knowing the type of game that Donovan Edwards had last year against Ohio State. I was like, how much are they going to mix him into the fold with kind of that change of pace that he brings? The big mismatch that I loved, and he played really well. I know we talked earlier, and you said he sat out a little bit. But Colston Loveland, I mean, I think he's got the tools to be a solid player at the next level as a tight end. I don't think he probably will be like a blocking tight end. He'd be more like that receiving type, build out skill a little bit more, work on the route tree a little bit. But his size, his speed, his athleticism, like it's there to be an NFL player. So I really liked what I saw out of him. There were a few plays that proved to me that Marvin Harrison is that dude and is going to be that dude. More particularly the one-handed catch with the defensive pass interference, or I don't know if they call it interference or holding or whatever.
Yeah.
The 40-yard bomb. I was like, okay, that's a grown man. Like that's a Sunday catch right there. But more importantly, man, this Michigan team, they stuck through it without Harbaugh. The defense showed up with some of those interceptions and obviously making the game-sealing one at the end. I thought with kind of the chunk plays they were getting there at that last drive starting out, they moved 40 yards pretty quickly with I think, was it Igbuka? Somebody. I think Fleming had a sideline catch on the right side. But I was like, okay, they're going to get this down there because it was 24-30 at that point. I was like, just the way these games go, like they're going to score a touchdown and it's going to be a 1-point game and Ohio State's going to win. But they got pressure on McCord. I had to let it go and, throwing off that back foot, taking a hit, ball came up a little short and boom, interception, sealed it. Huge win. Should be super proud of this team. They deserve it. McCord definitely played better than I expected him to. I think going into next year, especially with Michigan losing a handful of, their offensive guys, I would probably lean toward Ohio State in that fact of being more of the possible winner of this matchup next year. But getting Harbaugh back going into next week, this Michigan team is doing what they need to do, and this defense is legit to face any of these, whoever's going to be in the top 4 with them. Unless they do something crazy and Iowa manages to put up 45 points on them, which I don't think – I probably bet
that would be the craziest thing, considering, they could only put up, 10 against Minnesota, but it's a championship game. You'll never know what happens.
Did you see, speaking real quick, did you see the line on the Iowa game last week before the game?
Yeah, didn't it settle at 24.5?
Yes. And it hit the under.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's the whole thing. They're 9 for 9 on the unders this year. The last 9 unders, they're 9 for 9. I believe right now it is 36 or 35 and a half or something like that in the Big Ten championship. And I think Michigan's favored by like 22 or something like that. So it looks like the committee likes, not the committee. What am I talking about? It looks like Vegas likes a 30-6 kind of win.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be really interesting. See if they can at least make it 10 for 10. And I mean, with how much Michigan likes to shorten games and them liking to run the ball, 30, 35 times a game, I can very much see that as a possibility. So it'll be a fun, side little thing to pay attention for in that game. But I will try not to rant, not rant, but go into too much and go on to too many tangents talking about this game.
Walk me through your day as you're getting ready for this kickoff. What is your mind? Where are we at? How are we feeling? Building up the moment.
I was in shambles. So I'm gonna be real honest with you. And you don't know this. I didn't watch the game. I didn't watch it as it was actually happening. There is something in me that is so broken that I think it does me more harm to actually watch the games. And I get that actual anxiety in me. I don't have it for other games, let's say they like the Rutgers game or Minnesota or whatever, Nebraska. Like I'll make it through those games.
Big stakes.
But I do want you to know that I thought it was over at about 2:30. And so I thought I would be good in the clear. I can just see what happens. And you talked about how they were driving the football down the field at the very last drive.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at ESPN and I thought the game would be fully over. And I saw 30-24 with them having the ball on the Michigan 30-yard line or so.
Yeah.
With like 35 seconds left. And I went into sheer panic, ran over to the TV, turned it on. And as the game comes up, Ohio State snaps the ball. McCord drops back, throws the interception, and I threw my arms up in the air and walked off. And I watched one play lifetime. And I know it's insane. There's something wrong with me. I fully understand. Like, don't get me wrong. I went back and watched the entire thing. I have watched the full game. But I do it almost in self-preservation for myself. And there's something wrong with me.
Mm.
That I get so filled with anxiety because I realize what kind of team that they have and what could be. That I don't watch.
Do you? So you don't watch, but do you like keep up with it lifetime?
Sometimes I will. For this game, I didn't. I stayed off social media. I stayed off everything. I got so much work done in my apartment. It was actually very productive. It's a very productive morning for myself. Um, but no, I will tell you that like I'm in that group of like terrible sports fans that have this like weird superstition and weird juju that like my team will play better if I don't watch. I think it's at this point, it's just that I'm self-preserving for myself. And like I just feel it so physically within my body that I
So
just have decided not to watch.
what if? Okay, like last year, like did you watch the college football playoff game lifetime?
I did. I was with friends and we were all watching the game. Um yes, I did watch that, unfortunately.
So if you had it, I'm having weird deja vu right now. So if you had it your way, no, dude, wow, this is tripping me out. We've had this conversation in my head before. Um, if you've had it your way this year and make it to the college football playoff, ideally, obviously, if there's not some kind of party or get together going on, you wouldn't watch either game lifetime if they made it
I
round and into the championship.
I don't know. I have had the conversation with myself of like they're literally like in the college football like semifinal in the national championship if they get there. Um that's like a you have to watch it. Like you just do. You just have to watch.
Uh-huh.
Um yes, I've had that conversation with myself. I don't know for sure what will happen. Um but yeah.
So for you, the stress, oh gosh, slam my head in the mic. The stress, the anxiety of the potential negative and downturns in a game outweigh the euphoric positive moments that you feel during a game in lifetime.
I'm a super pessimistic and negative person when it comes to football. For sure. I watched the last like 7 minutes of that Maryland game when it came real close. I was in dire straits. It was not good.
Yeah. See, to me, that one's almost more understandable because, like, it's an opponent uh, you wouldn't expect to be. It's an upset in that turn of events, and you're throwing away your season for a game that shouldn't have mattered really in the first place.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's the thing of like I know how I'm gonna be for Ohio State. Like I also like I'm not gonna subject other people. Like if I had the option, if I had to watch, I'm not gonna subject other people to that.
Is this is this an inherited trait?
Slightly. Yeah. Shout out,
Okay.
Dad.
Okay.
He'll be listening to this later in the week.
Interesting.
Yeah. It is a little bit. I will have you know that he did watch the game,
Uh-huh.
whereas I did not because we were in two different locations for the game.
Okay.
So
Well, one of these days in the future, in your lifetime, whenever Michigan's in the national championship, we'll make sure that you're at that game in person.
Oh,
We
dude,
can
I've even thought
facing
about watching the game in person, and I don't even know how that would go. So, yeah, that is that's my thing. I know it's
no, you're not the only one.
look, I can watch Baylor. I get nervous and whatever for Baylor. Obviously not this year because they're terrible. But it hasn't reached that level yet. I've been able to watch all Baylor games. I've been there for quite a few of them, going to the school. Um, it's just not the same level for me.
I mean, it's different stakes. I mean, you have a Michigan team that is a potential national championship caliber team year in, year out kind of program, whereas even if you're going 12-0 in the regular season, I still don't know if I'm putting all my
I know what you're saying. I
Prime
understand, but
put Prime RG3 back there. I'm still not feeling like I'm gonna win a championship. Whereas I don't know. It's different stakes. It is different.
it's
I
yeah,
get it.
and it isn't even that. It's just because Michigan has been the team, the college team I've rooted for since I was, like 5.
Yeah.
And it's just different when it's your first team. I used to be worse about the Raiders, but they've just been so bad for so long that I don't really expect a whole lot from them, that's worn off a little bit. So yeah, it is, it's terrible of me, slightly crappy, got to support my team by watching them.
Well, Jacob,
A lot of the times I don't.
I just wanted to verify this information, and I did. Maybe that's the reason Michigan's not won a national championship in your lifetime.
What? Because I don't watch?
Because you don't watch. They need you. They need you. They need your eyeballs. Whether it's in person or on TV, they need them live time.
Well, they just beat the number 2 team in the country, and I didn't watch.
Oh, that's fine and dandy. They need you to get over the finish line. They need
I
you.
I watched the TCU game last year. They lost.
Funny enough, not that it's the same thing, but kind of tangent in talking about watching games. My oldest brother is a big baseball guy, and this was the very first year he subscribed to Bally Sports or whatever and watched every single Rangers game. They won the World Series, baby. They got over the finish line. So I'm telling you, you got to watch live time, full season. Yeah. And I'm going to make that a bucket list item for you. We're going to overcome that. And you're going to go to, it's not Lansing, is it? Is it Lansing? Ann Arbor. I'm sorry. Lansing's the other one.
Don't do that.
We're going to have a trip. We're going to go to Ann Arbor and we're going to have a blast. We're going to get some, I don't know what specialty food is there. So I'm not even going to throw out a random thing. But yeah, we're going to go to Michigan and oh, no.
What happened?
Oh, we're still recording.
Okay.
As
you can hear, we have a lot of technical difficulties, a lot of issues over here.
I thought it was going to stop the recording.
Yeah, so I mean that was a big long tangent around the whole entire, I was going to go into the game and then we talked about, my own shortcomings and whatnot. I equate, my happiness with a football team, and so that's why I don't watch. Anyways,
nonetheless, you're happy they won.
Yeah.
Give me. I say we going on a tangent here. I haven't even given an analysis of your feelings of the game. How do you think going back and watched it, did it play out how you were expecting?
Yeah, I could going back and watching it. The good thing is I can watch it with a very
Open mind.
clear and open perspective.
Mhm.
So a couple things. I'm actually going to start with Ohio State very quickly. Um, for all the Ohio State fans out there that want to get rid of Ryan Day, I think you are absolutely crazy. I understand. You got to beat Michigan. Fully understand, but the man has lost. He's like 57-6. I mean that's crazy numbers. He's doing a great job. At some point he'll figure it out. This is not the end of the world. And this is coming from somebody who watched Michigan lose 8 in a row most recently. And we kept Jim Harbaugh through 0-5. It's like it's not the end of the road. He's a great coach. Whether if you agree with all of the philosophies and whatnot that he brings, and he's compared to Urban Meyer all the time, which is just unfortunate. It is what it is. I still think you gotta go with him for at least a little bit longer. Secondly, and the only thing I'll kind of leads into the analysis of the game is that whether I think they should be in the playoff, because I do, however, believe that just eye test wise, I still think that Ohio State is one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the country for sure. I think that game was extremely even. Going back and watching it, that game was, score and answer back to back, especially in the second half. There was so many answers to each team scoring. And Ohio State has a very, very good team, even though that team looks a lot different than the very, very good teams that we have seen in how they are made up and how they are able to win football games. And I think the last thing I'll say, just kind of as a brief overview, Jim Harbaugh did say that that's the best Ohio State team that they've played against. I think that's false. I think it's true that that is maybe the best Ohio State team in terms of being able to beat Michigan in the last few years that we've seen. I think Michigan was built over the last few years to beat Ohio State. I think in turn, because they're a lot more like the Michigan that we've seen, this Ohio State team was the best and most well-built to beat Michigan this year, rather than what we saw the last couple of years, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I didn't totally agree with what he said, but I feel like that was where he was going, because some of the teams in like 2019 and in a couple of those earlier teams, those were absolutely fantastic teams that I think were better than what we see this year. Do you have a comment?
Yeah. So we'll get into it a little bit more when we're talking about this week's matchups. So real quick, just going off, talking about this team and their potential of being in the playoff for just the way they played. Say Oregon beats Washington, right? So that knocks Washington to 1 loss. And let's say just in this scenario, Florida State loses to Louisville, so they're out. They're also down a quarterback, so they're out. And let's say Texas loses.
Okay.
So you have Washington, Oregon, and Ohio State. Not taking Bama into this consideration. Just we'll say Georgia wins for this scenario. So you got Oregon's going to go in because they beat them.
Right.
So then you have Washington 1 loss and Ohio State 1 loss. Who would you give the edge to for that 4th spot?
This might be me being biased, but in my mind, it's really not that close. I'm taking Washington.
Okay.
Because they made it to their conference championship game. They were 13-0 pretty much at the final regular season matchup. Before they played an extra game, they were ahead of Ohio State.
Gotcha.
They are ahead. They have technically, I was actually looking at this great page on Twitter's very analytics based resume page for the college football playoff rankings, which by the way had Michigan should be at number 1. Just throwing that out there. Which that's my lukewarm take, is that Michigan should be in that number 1 spot. I think that and they did this last year with USC losing to Utah in their championship game. Ohio State just kind of fell backwards into the college football playoff.
Mm-hmm.
They lost and they should have been out, and then they fell backwards into it, even though that they didn't go to their conference championship game. And I get it. I do. They always say the 4 best teams, and they've never officially defined what that means. Does that mean eye test? Does that mean resume? And we'll get into that a little bit later, or we can get into that right now, talking about college football playoff rankings, because I have strong opinions about Florida State. I think it's so up in the air of what they actually mean by 4 best.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like, you get these teams who just benefit by not playing. And it seems wrong to me that you can benefit by not playing. If the teams were good enough to make it and be ranked above a certain team, and they had to play a separate team, they had to play a 13th game, which, by the way, will be against a team that is ranked above Ohio State already. I don't think that should be seen as a negative, in that they will fall behind a team that didn't even play that game, didn't even play an extra game.
But I think the only issue with that is, like, not every conference is built out the same, to where not every conference has 2 different divisions. Whereas, say, for instance, I'm trying to think of say the SEC, for instance. Let's say Georgia wins out, and then on the other side in the West, you have Alabama, and again, this is just hypothetical, LSU, for example. LSU didn't play Georgia that year or whatever. LSU wins every single game except for Alabama. And they just get the downfall of them being in the same side, and they don't get to play. And say Georgia lost 3 games, but they still won the East. And it's the same thing that's happening in Big Ten right now, with Michigan and Ohio State being in the same division. It's kind of like, well, I just got the short end of the stick, but the other half of my conference is garbage, and I can't do anything about it. So why am I getting penalized for not playing in that extra game, even though I'm as good as we are? We just lost to what should be a higher ranked team, and they will be, but we're kind of just out of luck when it comes to conference championships.
Yeah, and you're out of luck.
You're just
but
done.
they've said that when they look at, they haven't determined what really the best 4 means, but they have said that they look at strength of schedule, they look at quality wins, they look at, did you make your conference championship?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, did you make your conference championship? Different conferences have different rules on how you get there, and whether I like it or not, the Big Ten will be in that space where it's just the best 2 teams, and they will no longer have divisions.
Which is the way it should be, in my mind.
I don't like it.
You don't want to play Ohio State again?
No, it's that I think it was broken how the Big Ten had it, which it was the disparity between the Big Ten East and the Big Ten West was so great that it was just like, we get to the end of the year, the last few years, and it's like, all right, who's going to win? Michigan and Ohio State are going to play each other, who's going to win the Big Ten. They don't
Exactly.
even really have to think about that. I just think it needs to be balanced a little bit better. And I think if you took teams in like they are now with Oregon and Washington, you put them in the Big Ten West. Let's forget about UCLA and USC. Now it becomes super interesting. You have you have Oregon, Washington in the Big Ten West, and you have Michigan and Ohio State all of a sudden in two different conferences. Two different divisions. Now that's just super compelling and it's incredible. And you still have those divisions. You're going to have 20 teams just fighting for two spots at the very top. And everybody's playing different teams. Like Michigan's schedule next year, let's not even talk about the out of conference or the non-conference schedule where they're playing Texas. But their conference schedule is way harder than Ohio State's. But everybody's just in the same conference. And so it's just gonna level out to, because we have 20 teams in that conference or 18 or whatever it is. And it's just, I don't know. I'm a fan of divisions. I like it. It's traditional. It's what I know.
I think it works right, like you said, when it's balanced correctly. I just think there's such an imbalance across the country right now. We haven't seen a balance truly in I don't know how long, both in Big Ten, the SEC. There's no, I mean, I don't know. I just don't see it hasn't been done the right way in a long time. So I don't know. I'm just playing devil's advocate at the other end of the stick.
I mean, at this point, I mean, with the SEC, it's like it's still divisions, but it's still the two best teams.
Sure. But like, I think the West is 10 times overloaded than the East is. I think it's not close in my eyes. I think there's way more better teams in the West than
maybe
the East.
in prior years, but this year I would argue it's really pretty close.
This year has been closer. Yes. I think the SEC has been.
I think what's hurt the East is that Florida's been so bad.
Florida post Tim Tebow has not been. I mean, they went to 3 national championships in 5 years or whatever, and that was before Georgia was Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so there was that shift in power from Florida to Georgia, and there was a sprinkle in a year of Tennessee here and there, but you're typically never going to see a Kentucky at the top, a Vanderbilt at the top. Mizzou's rarely they're going to have a year like they had this year, but it's not going to get better than that. But I mean, year in year out, you have the potential of an Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss, A&M, Auburn, even if they're playing well on offense. 5 teams that can be in the top 15 potentially. I mean, 4 of them are right now, or 3 of them. I don't know where. No. Yeah, they're not ranked. But nonetheless.
Speaking of Ole Miss, the projected bowl for them is playing Iowa, and that's going to be hilarious. Just with how those two teams play football, it's the exact opposite. It's going to be hilarious. Gosh, what do we want to get into? I mean, that we just went on such a tangent. I mean, we'll talk about the college football playoff right now.
Yeah, we can segue. We can kind of touch on the Iron Bowl with just the Alabama game when we talk about them in a little bit. But yeah, so college football playoff. You said you had strong opinions. Rankings came out last night.
And this is my strong opinion. It's not that it's happened yet.
Okay.
And we saw a little bit of it, and it's that the committee lacks a certain consistency and direction.
Okay.
That I think is important when it's something as important as ranking the top 4 teams.
Okay.
I think that they go back and forth with some teams they value resume and some teams they value eye test. And I don't care if you either value eye test or if you want to value resume, but that's what they've been doing. They've been mixing it up and going, different, avenues here and there. And I think we're seeing at the very end with a team like Texas, who them and their fans are just kind of in limbo because they look fantastic on paper, yet they're behind a team like Oregon, who is not all that great on paper, but they're great in the eye test wise because they have played Oregon State in the last few weeks, but that's pretty much it. Their back half their season was relatively easy. And so I just would love an actual more thought out and direct answer as to what we're going to get into how we evaluate teams when it's literally just 4. And I don't think we're going to get it because this is the last year that we're going to have 4. And we're going to move to 12, and that opens up a lot more, leniency in a lot of things and, whatnot. But and I didn't even get to my hottest take yet.
I was going to say
that was just me being mad. My hottest take is if Florida State, I don't care if they win by 1, if they win by 40, if they're not in the college football playoff, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. If they go 13-0, win the ACC, and they don't get in.
Okay. Let me clarify, just to make sure I'm understanding everything.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the rankings that came out yesterday, is there something you don't agree with?
I've always, I haven't agreed with Oregon being above Texas.
Don't agree with Oregon being above Texas.
Yes.
Is there a particular reason other than kind of what you explained?
Because me personally, I think resume and deserving, kind of lends itself to be more towards a resume, like what's your resume at this point, kind of perspective. And I think that Texas's resume and what they've done is more deserving of being higher than Oregon.
Interesting, because I very much so don't agree.
Why is that?
Texas beat Alabama, which is fantastic on your resume.
In Tuscaloosa.
100% in September.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, Texas, to me, hasn't proven a single thing. They lost to Oklahoma. Should have lost to Kansas State.
Yep.
And they've had every other game be a close game with Houston, with TCU, with Iowa State. Teams that, frankly, probably aren't even in the top 75 when it comes to strength of schedule. And I'm not vowing for anyone's strength of schedule when it comes to Oregon because they're like 63. But they arguably could have beat Washington, which is their one loss. They beat Oregon State. They beat every other Pac-12 team.
Mm-hmm.
Bo Nix is in the Heisman conversation. They played very well across the board. Haven't really had a ton of these closer games, as many as Texas has. And what I see, I look at the resumes, I would say they're close. Personally, I'd give the edge to Oregon, even though I don't think the Pac-12 is strong. But I still think they're close. I wouldn't say it's like a huge difference between the two. I would say to me, then, okay, I'm not going to use that as my tiebreaker because I do think they're very close. So I'm going to go to my next thing. And for me, that is going to come down to the eye test. And when I look at these two teams, I don't think they compare on the offensive side of the ball so far from what I've seen, just because there is a lot of inconsistency with, they've had the injury with Ewers. He plays well, he doesn't play well. I think the running game with Bucky Irving is way better. I think Texas probably has the better defense. But I don't think it's, I don't know. In a bad year, I think I would say the Big 12 overall, I think the Pac-12 has shown to be much better this year, even though I don't think overall, there's definitely some big glaring weak spots in the Pac-12. But I think overall it's a stronger conference this year, which is kind of ironic considering it's breaking up. Go it out with a bang. But I don't know. I think there's more things, in my opinion, lead Oregon to be above. I don't think I don't want to say something real quick with it not being correct. That's a tough one. It's tough with Ohio State sandwich right between them. I don't know. I'd almost put like a 5 A, B, and C as opposed to a 5, 6, and 7. I think it's very close.
I mean, so what I will say is when I look at resume and deserving, I do really like to see, and it's pretty, the difference is pretty significant in terms of strength of schedule. Oregon is at 62, Texas is 13th. Texas also has a better strength of record, which I think is a little bit even more telling than strength of schedule, because I mean, I'm a Michigan fan. Mm-hmm. The whole year they haven't played anybody. Their strength of schedule is terrible. I mean, now they're better. They're now sitting at 36, but their strength of record, Michigan, is 1. They have the best strength of record, and I think that's very telling. It's like, yes, you can have whatever schedule that you have, and you can't really change that in the moment, but you can determine how you handle those games and how you perform. And Texas has still, even though, they may not have the best, they still have a tough schedule, and what they've done with it is have the best strength of record, the 6th best strength of record in the country. I think they look fantastic in terms of the last couple weeks in the eye test, and they have Ewers back. They put down a Texas Tech that Oregon beat by 8. They beat them by 50. I know it's at 2 different points in the year, and I know that teams get better, but it's still a common opponent. And Texas beat them by 50. They have what I think is not a better win, but it's a harder win, in that they had to go into Tuscaloosa to beat Alabama. Washington just hasn't been the same team since they beat Oregon. I mean, we'll go into that game. I'll be rooting for them, but I just don't think that they're going to win against Oregon. So when it comes down to it, I am just a person that values, if you're more deserving, if you have, I think, the better resume, what do the numbers say? And the numbers say, in their schedule, it says Texas favored just a little bit. Do I think that's going to be fixed after these weeks of games? Yeah, probably. I think Oregon will get in, either way. But just because they're ranked ahead and they'll beat Washington, and I'll be all said and done, and they'll have that great win over the number 3 team. And at that point, it's kind of, it'll be I think more obvious when you have a win against a number 3 team, and Texas is only, unfortunately for them, they're playing against the number 20 team, or I don't know where Oklahoma State is in terms of ranking.
Something like that.
Um,
20.
so after this week, I think that whole situation will be kind of a moot point. But I don't know. It's been a little bit frustrating because it seems like they look at different things. Because we sat here at the beginning of the rankings, when they came out in week 9, week 10, and we both sat here and basically said we think that Ohio State is going to jump both Michigan and Georgia, not because necessarily they're better, but they have those 2 ranked wins. And they've done what they needed to do, and that's the committee agreed with us, and they put them in that exact spot. And it's like I think they just switch up at what they look at and what they value. With that being said, I'll be yelling next year on the podcast if Florida State wins and they don't get in. But that's just me.
I think that if they win, they're in. I don't think they'll. I think kind of looking similarly to last year, that was kind of the conversation. Granted, there was a loss in that situation, but it was, TCU's going into their conference championship, which they, came out with a loss or whatever. And it's like, you still got to put them in because they were the only other 13-1 team or whatever it was to get to that point. I think the same thing, quarterback, no quarterback. If you go undefeated, you got to give that defense and the rest of those kids a chance to, fight for a national championship. Because that's what you would do if Jordan Travis was there. So I guarantee that if Florida State wins, that they're in. I don't see that changing anything.
There's been a lot of talk.
No, I don't.
That they'll leave them out.
I don't buy it. I think, regardless if they win, I don't think they move. I think they'll stay at 4. I think I wouldn't be surprised. Let's say like Oregon wins or whatever, then they're 12-1, Pac-12 champions. Washington drops out. I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon jumps into 3 in an undefeated. Florida State stays at 4.
Yeah, I can see that.
But I think they win, they're in. Because Louisville, they're a good team. They did lose to Kentucky last week, but they got a strong defense. Their offense has its moments. Plummer took some shots last week. I saw him get beat up on the field. But yeah, so I think even if, if the backup Rodemaker can make something happen and they win that game, then that's something to be, even if it was Jordan Travis, it's a solid win. But nonetheless, I guess that'll kind of segue a little bit here. I feel like this is going to be long, I can tell.
Yeah, but like we said,
okay.
It's going to be long. Good. We didn't get the episode out last week. We're just kind of going back and forth on a tangent here. Let's get into the Iron Bowl, shall we?
Sure.
Unfortunately, the episode didn't go out last week. And so it's not officially on record where we talked about for a couple minutes how there's probably no real chance that it's going to be close unless Auburn was just joking around with New Mexico State, realized that, their season really isn't going to really come to anything. They're not fighting for a big bowl game. They're not fighting for the college football playoff, but they still are bowl eligible. That they lost to New Mexico State by 21 on purpose to throw Alabama off so that they can come in the next week and absolutely just mess everything up. And boy, they should have. And they were so close. And they had an opportunity to be America's team for about 15 minutes. and give Bama a loss, it would have, it would have made the college football playoff picture a little bit clearer, because even if they beat Georgia, they're not getting in after losing to Auburn and whatnot. The offense just didn't look very good. Granted, Auburn's defense is they're pretty solid. Gave Georgia some issues, but that offense that Bama put out on the field, just they looked sluggish. They weren't able to move the ball that well. They didn't execute when they needed to. And Auburn just kind of out of nowhere would just make plays. And they would just be able to get down the field and score points when they needed to. And they let up a 4th and 31. 4th and goal from the 31. I mean, I don't know. I was highly disappointed, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, man. Weird things happen in Jordan-Hare Stadium. My youngest cousin is actually a senior this year at Auburn, so I'm sure she was at the game or celebrating or whatever, and would have been a really cool moment for her to go out her senior year. But nonetheless, none of this made sense. I don't know why this Alabama team didn't show up against LSU. That would have been real nice. And it's really not like, if you go and look at the stats, like Auburn did play terrible on offense. Like they weren't good. They're not good. Peyton Thorne is not good. But Bama just didn't do anything. Didn't take advantage of opportunities, made mistakes. I didn't watch the whole game. I watched it as it was, kind of the second half and things were getting a little dicey. But Milroe just, I don't know. He looked indecisive, like couldn't make up his mind on what he wanted to do. Whereas the Jalen Milroe that I saw in the LSU game was a dude that knew what he was going to do. And like, if it's A, I'm going to run the ball, or B, I'm going to hit my guy, like he did it. There was no hesitation with anything. And he took off if he wanted to run. Whereas I felt like he just looked really uncomfortable in the pocket, didn't know what decisions to make. And if that's the team that shows up against Georgia, like, it's not going to fly. You're not going to get a 4th and 31 touchdown conversion to win the game against Georgia. That just ain't going to happen. It definitely kind of talked about this game should be counted as a half loss. And it definitely should take an impact on, the implications going forward. Again, Alabama needs a lot to go in their way for them to even if they beat Georgia to get into the national or the college football playoff. I mean, you would need Washington to lose, Texas to lose, Florida State to lose. Like, you would need every person that's in the front runner seat right now in their conference to lose, every upset in theory. And you'd also have to beat Georgia probably handedly or by 10 points to kind of get yourself in that conversation. So I don't know, man. It's a weird. Auburn's defense is very good. Typically, year in, year out, they're very strong in the line. They put in pro after pro in the league. They're stout up front. Their DBs are good. But, like, you shouldn't have this much trouble. Again, New Mexico State scored more points against Auburn. LSU put up 48 against Auburn.
I mean, it's not even like, so what I'll say is, like, you didn't even see an Auburn team that, like, they were 6-5, but they had just gotten off beating New Mexico State. Granted, they are in their conference championship for Conference USA or something like that. They didn't get off, week 12, beating a New Mexico State team 34-21 or something like that, where it's like, it's close, but whatever, 34-27, whatever. They got beat by 21.
Yeah.
Um, and then you waltz in there, and one of the things I did say, and I thought of you, was watching quite a bit of that game. It did look like Auburn was much more focused on keeping Jalen Milroe in the pocket,
Mm-hmm.
um, a lot less stunts to get straight to the quarterback, and a lot more rushes from
Upfield.
just still keeping that pocket and getting upfield and not letting him get outside. But I also do know that it was like around half the time or so they had a spy on him, which I
Yeah.
know, which is what you were begging LSU to do.
Yeah.
um and it seemed to work really well because Milroe is going to be a 2 to 3 seconds look downfield, bam, hit the guy if I like what I see. But if I don't like what I see, okay, now we look to run. Well, if option B is look to run and, oh, hey, I can't run, then I have to go back to the air and then everything becomes indecisive. And it just looked just very, this isn't a good word for it, but gross, but just like not put together. It was not fluid like we saw with LSU. Um, Yeah, it was crazy. That was not the Alabama team that we've seen for like the last 6 weeks,
Yeah.
and it was very odd.
The-
And going into Georgia, they're gonna see exactly what Auburn did, what worked well. Kirby's gonna
yeah.
be ready, and B, Georgia has, and I think they do this the best out of any team in the country, just time and time again. I see Georgia be able to do this, is just adapt to what they're seeing in like the first quarter, the first half, and then they make those adjustments. They might come out slow. They might, not play, like we've talked about, they may not play like the Georgia that we all know in the first half, but they're gonna get there and they're gonna turn it on. And you better hope that they don't play a good first half of football, because if they play two good halves of football, you're not even gonna get close.
Yeah.
With like a team like Alabama, where they can be very streaky, and they can struggle against teams who just are there that day. Like it's so weird. They can do these things like put up 50. I think they put up 55 against Kentucky, but they just look very stagnant and not be able to do anything, and barely put up, on a last second heave, they put up 27 on Auburn.
Yeah.
And it's weird because Alabama and Nick Saban, you don't see them play really two bad games in a row, so I'm sure they'll get some of that figured out. Um, but I think if you're Georgia, you're looking at that, and we know what to do. We know what defense. We know what we can expect, and I think Georgia's probably got to be looking at that like, we can take care of this game. Even if Peyton Thorne can make throws on them, Carson Beck's going to be able to make throws and get some passes definitely completed, and that offense can get rolling. So I think if you're Alabama, you feel like you're in a lot of trouble. I'm not saying that they can't win, but I don't love their chances in that game. Even I didn't before that Auburn game, but now it's just like, I don't know. To me, Georgia has that blueprint, and they're like, Auburn showed us what works really well against them. We're a much better team than Auburn. Let's go take care of it. Easy.
Yeah. I think, it's funny kind of thinking about this full circle now, how impactful different things about college football can be. Because typically you have, for a team to be really good, you have certain players that are superstars and they make the team really good, or you have superstar coaches who coach so well that the team is just so well put together and so well organized. The scheme works so good that it brings up the athletes to a different level that they normally wouldn't play at, and the team is good. But then you have the level of really good coaching, and you already had the superstars, and it's just like that's your national championship caliber type of team. And I think this year you have Saban. Saban is the reason Alabama's winning these games, and it's going to come down to like Saban's going to get them ready for Georgia in the best possible way. There's really no one more experienced in being in these situations than Nick Saban, and he's going to do everything he can to outsmart Kirby and plan the perfect game. But at the end of the day, Milroe and this offense is going to have to make the plays, and there's nothing. Saban's not going to put a helmet on. He's 70 years old. He can't do anything about that. And so putting the game in his hands to execute what Saban draws up, I just don't have the faith in it. Whereas I think the competency and level of a Carson Beck is a little more poised. You know, he's not the runner, sporadic kind of mind that Milroe is. The run game is much more established in Georgia than it is in Bama. McClellan is nor here nor there. They don't have the freshman kid, Williams. Roydell Williams is kind of, will bring him in for a drive here and there, whereas Dejon Williams and Kendall Milton are those dudes. Like, they're powering that offense. Beck is managing it. They got Bowers back. He's playing. He's healthy. McConkey's coming on at the right time. Defense is playing well. Granted, I didn't watch the Georgia Tech game. Score ended up being a lot closer than I expected. So I don't know exactly what happened there. But nonetheless, this game is probably going to look like it. I mean, I'd say Georgia's the heavy favorite going into this just based on, again, the eye test of what we saw last week from Bama. But just knowing these two coaches, the history here, that game is probably going to be a close one. It's probably going to be a hard-fought battle. Someone may pull away, and I would say I'd lean towards Georgia on that toward the end with interception or, you know, a 2-touchdown lead at the end because of a late score or something. I couldn't imagine a blowout in any sort of the way, but yeah, Bama's got to get it together. Jalen Milroe came out after the game saying, "Give me the Heisman, give me the Heisman."
Oh yeah, dude, I saw that. I was like,
I mean,
no.
If that's something you're proud of, I mean, you know, props to you there.
Maybe next year. He'll be back next year.
Maybe. I mean, you're losing a lot of your competition that would be there for it. So,
but this year, I don't know about that, man.
He's higher ranked on that list than I'd like to say, but yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, the top, you know,
I think they
we'll say the top. Yeah, well, the top two guys are pretty, you know, far and away top two, and I think one is even above number two. So, for sure. Yeah, I heard that too. I was like, you know, after the game that we just had, I don't know. I mean, you threw it into the corner of the end zone. But you know, maybe I don't know. But yeah, I heard that as well.
Yeah, no, it was it made for some fun clips to see on Twitter. I'll say that after the game and kind of all the excitement from Bama fans that saw or didn't see and got surprised at the end, or the kind of funny memes of Auburn fans that are crying in the stands after thinking they actually had a chance to pull off the crazy upset.
Yeah. But so do you want to go into the championship games and just go, you know, kind of rapid fire back and forth, as I think we are over an hour at this point. We've just been kind of rambling.
Just going. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. We'll start. We'll kind of go in chronological order and in the way that we'll see them, starting with the Washington and Oregon game. We already kind of talked about this a little bit. Like I said all year, my heart will be with the Huskies. It's just because, you know, they were the team that I predicted at the very start of the season, and they very still much have a shot to get into the college football playoff. All they got to do is win, and they're in. However, my brain, which is generally a better thing to, vote with and make predictions with when it comes to college football, it tells me that Oregon's going to win. They're playing some really great football. And like I said earlier, all that stuff, we can go kind of debate back and forth on whether or not Texas should be in front of Oregon. Oregon should be in front of Texas. Just the fact of the matter is that Oregon is in front right now. And if they go in and they beat Washington, they will be in the college football playoff. And so it's a win and you get in kind of situation. And it'll be a great game on Friday night.
Yeah, no, it'll be a great matchup. I'm starting to get a little worried with the public and just in general, kind of the consensus that Oregon's probably going to win this game. I think they've opened as like a 7.5 point favorite or something. And I think everyone's feeling like, oh, Oregon's got this. Like, just they're playing better. They should have won the first game. And I've been one of those people. It's now got me in this weird, like, I don't know, karma cycle of like, well, that's not the way this works. Too many people going one way on something, it's going to turn out the opposite. So I don't want to say that Washington's going to win this game. I still like Oregon to win it. But I don't know. I think I wouldn't be shocked if it didn't go that way. If Washington, again, why would you be? The team's undefeated.
Absolutely not. Yeah, no. But it's just that, I mean, to me, their offense isn't playing the way their offense was at the beginning of the season. They just don't look as sharp, and that defense has been a question kind of all year. And yeah. I don't trust in them to kind of step up when the offense absolutely needs it. So, and Oregon can get it done on the ground. They can get it done through the air, and their defense is really solid. Maybe not one of the very, very top defenses in the country, but still very, very solid and serviceable, and have held a lot of teams to very little points this year.
I'll point out this one stat for Washington, or Washington's defense, to take into account because they're totally listening to this. I found the stat when a lot of my Twitter feed is filled with Heisman stuff with Jayden Daniels and whatnot, and kind of just a comparison because it's between him and Bo Nix, and the people that think Bo Nix is well above Daniels and vice versa, and breaking down the actual stats pretty deep. Bo Nix passing yards, almost 70% of his yards happen between -2 and 9 yards from the line of scrimmage. So a lot of screen plays, a lot of yards after catch. So if I'm Washington, play press, get up in their face, stop those screen plays, the short yardage attacks, prevent, the yards after catch, force Nix to work the ball down the field, and you might find some more success. But yeah, I just thought that was an interesting number. It's kind of crazy to think about. 70% is within that short of a distance. But nonetheless, good luck to both teams. It's going to be a great Friday night matchup. Tune into that one. But that'll lead us into
if Florida State and, well, I guess I said we were going to do them kind of in the order that we'll see them. So that would be Texas and Oklahoma State. They have the 11 o'clock game on Saturday. And I think this is at Jerry Dome. I just think for the foreseeable future, that's where the Jerry Dome, Jerry World, same place, Jerry's Palace, if you will. I had the great fortune to see the Baylor Bears in 2021 beat the Oklahoma State Cowboys in, me personally, I think one of the best finishes of all time. Just talking about literally the last play. Okay. If you remember that, I'm not sure if you. It's a play where they had 1st and goal from the 1, and they got all the way to 4th and goal from the 1. Dude ran around the left side and stretched out. It was basically a foot race to the. You've seen the play. I know that you have. It was a great way to end it was absolutely fantastic. Gave me heart attacks up and down, but with me, that's no surprise. With that being said, on to the game. I sang a lot of praise for Oklahoma State in the middle of the year. And immediately they followed that up with losing to UCF 45-3, 42-3, something like that.
Yeah.
Still haven't forgiven them for that, and I don't really think they bounced back from that fully yet. BYU, they should have lost that game. They were down huge, and I mean they made this great comeback.
Yeah.
And props to them for doing so, but they were kind of dead to rights in that game. I'm taking Texas. I mean, they just came off beating up on a Texas Tech team 57-7, 50-7, something like that. Yeah, I like Texas. I think they're going to try to make a very big statement to propel themselves, maybe leap over a couple teams, maybe. I don't think it's going to happen, especially if Oregon takes care of business and Florida State does. But they're going to at least try. I think that's what they'll be going in there to do, score lots of points, make the margin of victory very big. I'm taking Texas.
Yeah, I agree. Texas is the better team here. I think their defense is too good. I don't think Oklahoma State's going to be able to do what they did really well in the middle of the season with Gordon. I think you shut him down, and then you're pretty smooth sailing there. So yeah, I think Texas takes care of business in Jerry World. Good old Arlington.
Yeah. Moving on into the 3 o'clock, 2:30, 3:30, whatever it's going to be slot, we have the SEC championship with Georgia and Bama. What we just talked about, we don't really have to go into it, but I'm taking Bama. Simple as that. Sorry, did I just say I'm taking Bama?
I was like, oh, okay.
Sorry, I'm not taking Bama. I'm taking Georgia.
Taking Georgia. Okay.
I mean, it would make things really interesting. I mean, so I'm kind of for that, and also I'm for Michigan getting the 1 seed. So if Bama could beat them, that would be great. All for Bama doing that, but I'm taking Georgia.
Yeah, I'm taking Georgia in this one as well. SEC championship played in Atlanta every year, kind of like a home game for the Bulldogs. I think they take care of business, but I'm sure it'll be a close one. It might come down to the fourth quarter. We'll see.
Maybe there's something in me that really wants me to take Bama. I don't know. Maybe deep down inside, I'm an Alabama Crimson Tide fan. I don't know what just came out of me there.
No.
And then we have 2 games. I think both are at that nighttime slot on Saturday night. We'll go with Michigan and Iowa. First off, I'd love to hear who you're taking.
That's pretty straightforward. Kind of talked about it at the beginning, but I think Michigan takes care of business. Iowa is a team that cannot put up points. I'll put their over-under at 8, and I'll take the under on that one. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be a game at all. So.
Yeah. Hopefully it isn't.
I'll be sure to watch for you.
I really hope it isn't, close till the very end. But just a few things I wanted to say earlier. I think the biggest thing for Michigan in that Ohio State game was that they won the moments. They didn't dominate stats-wise. They were outgained, and it wasn't like they pulled away at any point. But I do think they did a fantastic job in A, being able to answer whenever Ohio State threw a punch, and B, they won, kind of the things that are less stats based. They won the turnover battle, and they won in making sure to take momentum when it was needed. And I think that was something that, maybe they've lacked in the last couple of years, and they were able to be in a close game and come out on top against a very good team. Hopefully it'll benefit them moving forward. And so all of that to say, I'm taking Michigan. Really liked how the team played. I think they can play better on offense. And we'll see if they can do that against Iowa. And hopefully, we can kind of take a good step into the college football playoff for the third year in a row, which leads us into the last game, wrapping up this very long episode of this podcast. We have Florida State and Louisville. I'll just say off the bat, with all that being said and me pulling for Florida State and, kind of fending off the haters that think they shouldn't even get in at 13-0, I'm taking Florida State. I want to see him get in there. I was sorry to see what happened to Jordan Travis. Very unfortunate. We'll see if Tate Rodemaker, is that his name?
Mm-hmm.
Can, kind of put it together. I think he was able to put together an okay game, if I remember, against Florida. Wasn't anything special, but definitely got the job done. I think they'll need probably a little bit better performance out of him to beat Louisville, but I think it's definitely something he can do. And I'm taking Florida State.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and jump on the Florida State train as well. This defense is still good, healthy. I think if they can stop this Louisville offense with Jordan, stop the run game, and then vice versa, get the run game going. If Trey Benson plays like he did last week and kind of puts the team on his back and carries them to a victory, then so be it. But I'd like to see them win this game, even though we lost to them at the beginning of the year and set them on this path. They've fought this long, even if the ACC isn't as tough of a conference as some of the others. You're undefeated. You hate to see them, drop a game just because of a terrible injury. Hopefully they can win it for their quarterback, and even if they get blown out to whoever it is in that first matchup, at least they got to that point and something to be proud of. So I'm pulling for the Seminoles in this one.
Yep. I think we were 5 for 5 on that, no real what was that? Oh my god, the word is leaving my brain. I must be having a tough time. I can't think of words, and I took Bama in the SEC championship game.
Education's already going down the toilet.
Yeah, dude, is straight out. But anyways, yeah, I think that wraps up this episode. I'm still trying to think of that word, but it's not even going to come to me. I don't even know the word I'm trying to think of. But we appreciate if you sat and listened to us for this hour and I think probably 10, 15 minutes. Goodness gracious, this episode was long. We really appreciate you sticking around. And if you're here listening to us every single week, we really do appreciate it. Mason, before we sign off, do you have any last thing you want to say? It kind of looked like you had something to say.
No, I was just going to basically reiterate that. Yeah, we appreciate y'all and enjoy a great championship weekend, and can't wait to see how the Bulls turn out next week. And we'll catch y'all later.
See ya.